therapist say everything's gonna be alright.
The following is paid for by IMIC Incorporated.
The Cure with Aimee Cabo is brought to you by IMIC Research. Life can bring many difficult situations: domestic violence, addictions, poverty, and even sexual abuse by your loved ones. Welcome, Aimee Cabo and The Cure.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. This is The Cure, and I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. You're listening to us on South Florida Business Station 880 AM The Biz. Also available online, 880thebiz.com. And don't forget, you can download the app at 880 The Biz. We're live every Friday at 2 p.m., and you can listen to us through Alexa or iHeartRadio. We've had some powerful topics on this show that have to deal with abuse, how to prevent it, how to overcome it, post-traumatic stress disorder, symptoms, treatments available, other mental health problems, and any other form of suffering, whoever you may be. We provide testimonials as well as professionals in the field and people who are able to help. And today I'm joined by Dr. Boris Nikolov.
Hi, Aimee. How are you?
Thank you. We are going to soon be joined by a wonderful guest, Kirk Miller. And I see that he is with us now. Let me tell you a little bit about Kirk Miller, who's a very impressive person, I believe. Kirk Miller is the author of Chaos to Cured, co-host of the radio show Beyond Clarity, and founder of ChaosToCured.com. After overcoming and successfully managing bipolar 1, OCD, generalized anxiety, and ADHD, Kirk Miller now coaches and helps families, couples, and individuals realize there is more to who they are than their diagnosis. He has spent 10 years utilizing his unique perspective and insight to guide his clients to a more productive, positive, and stable life. As a mental fitness coach, Mr. Miller's goal is to help each and every client realize we all stumble and struggle at times, but where there is a will, healthy support, and guidance, there is always hope. Hello, Kirk. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Wonderful, Kirk. I am so very impressed because I see that you have what they call a quadruple diagnosis, and I'm familiar with that firsthand experience. Thank you very much. But I see that you've overcome a lot of stuff, bipolar and anxiety, and you've gotten to the point where you're able to help people in many different ways. And what's most curious to me is, how did you do it, Kirk? How did you find your balance despite how many obstacles you've had to face?
Well, there's, I think anytime you start off that journey, I was very lucky to have supportive friends and family members, and then, just a circle of support that made a huge difference. I think facing it on your own is always extremely difficult, and
I know
whether
that
family, and I know your story, and I found it so inspirational.
Thank you.
And I did want to say, a family doesn't have to come from just your mom or dad or a sibling. It's the people who you cherish in life and that are there to support you. And I was very lucky to have some wonderful people, including an amazing doctor who really was willing to kind of work with me. And that's one of the trickiest parts with having, bipolar 1 and this mixture of diagnoses that I had are problematic because the medication, the mixtures can cause problems. So for the ADHD, they give a central nervous system stimulant, and that can mess with the bipolar send some people into mania. For the generalized anxiety, they use a central nervous system depressant, which can definitely cause some downs for the mania. So trying to balance all of these issues, I really struggled. I was unable to finish college, and even my college transcripts, you see 18 credit hours and then time off, and 18 credit hours and time off. And I always did very well, but there were a lot of moments in my life that were very, very difficult, to the point at which I would get kind of suicidal, but then drop off from there to the point where I was catatonic. And I could never go to the doctor's office on my own. I really had a hard time going different places. Any change, especially with the OCD, was very difficult. And I didn't want to give up. I think the main thing was I felt that there were answers out there that people had not explored yet. And, of course, that's why I wanted to work with a doctor. But I took some pretty severe risks with my own health on medical hunches. I did massive amounts of research. And I think in my book, there's one point I explained, my room was kind of filled from the floor to the ceiling with study journals, peer-reviewed journals. I was looking at Europe, data that they had there, anywhere that I could kind of connect dots and figure out what might be an answer or what might be something that might help with my bipolar. I'd gone through every medication, and it was an excruciating process. Every time the medication changed, there was an adjustment period, and the medications were very hard on my body. I also had a lot of physical ailments. I have linear IgA, which is an autoimmune disorder, so I take one medication for that, and then erythrocytosis, which they also call secondary polycythemia. So I had a host of problems, and really the main thing that kept me going was a feeling that I had some kind of a purpose. And a lot of times, of course, the doctors would write that off as I was delusional. I never felt like I was, I never got what is somewhat common with bipolar, which is kind of a God complex. My manias definitely made me feel invincible, but I never felt like I was, born to save the world. But I did feel there was something there for me to offer, and there was more to my life than the suffering that I was going through. And just that tiny bit of hope kept me going, and I just held on to it with every ounce of strength I had. And eventually I stumbled onto a couple unique treatments for my bipolar, and I'm still using that medication. I will never go off medication, and I don't think anyone should ever discontinue without consulting their physician, of course. And always follow the doctors. The doctors are there to help. And that was one thing that's always was challenging, just because a lot of times I felt like I was being picked on. Doctors' offices to this day still scare me. Not because I was ever mistreated, but because of misconceptions and delusions that I had going into those offices. And especially there was one wonderful psychiatrist who was the one who diagnosed me, and I'd gone to a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists before him, but I never really treated him very well. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I called him, I found his number, and I called him up, and I thanked him for being there for me, because, I'm still here. And I feel very blessed and lucky to be alive. And I'm trying to be a voice that somebody can hear, and someone that people can reach out to when they're really struggling, and know that no matter how dark things get, we all have people that count on us and need us there. And it's worth fighting for staying alive and fighting for your dreams. I think it's really important for people to, not give up on themselves or on the world around them, and which is not always easy to do, but I think there's always hope, and there's always a way for people to find peace and happiness. It's going to come in different forms and at different paces for each and every individual, but that's part of everyone's journey. And so, it's important not to, of course, compare yourself to other people, but do the best that you can for yourself and be patient with yourself. And I think if you continue to try hard, I do believe in neuroplasticity. I think that really helped me, retraining how I thought, how I encountered each aspect of my day. So when things felt like they were falling apart or the sky was falling, I could kind of reset and focus on a more stable aspect or a more positive aspect that bipolar brought, which were a lot of gifts. I'm very good at playing the violin. That's what I do now, is I teach. And when I first started any of my jobs, I couldn't keep one. And now that I have balanced myself out and I manage my mental health issues very vigilantly, and now I can actually maintain a stable job, and I can actually help people too at the same time, which is for me a joy, and it's something that actually lightens my burden too. Every time I'm able to reach out, even if one person feels helped by what I say, it's still an impact that has a positive influence on the rest of my life. And I always use my hashtag is kindness ripples. And for me, I really feel like when you're kind and when you're trying your best, good things come your way. And
you definitely tend to feel better about yourself, because let me tell you, some of us, it takes forever to get good behaviors and get over thinking negative things about ourselves. It took me a very, very long time. I mean, it was until I would say, I don't know, well into my 40s that I realized, I need to pray every day, because it's great and dandy when somebody tells you, change your dialogue from negative to positive. But what if you're just stuck believing the negative and you feel like you're just destined to suffer? Before I got married, before I saw how God was blessing me, I thought God forgot about me, or maybe I didn't deserve his help. And that's how it was. It was very difficult. And it wasn't until I got married and I realized, well, if God gave me this husband, he must love me. And if God gave me these beautiful children, he must love me. And these beautiful pets. And then I realized later on in life, after about 25 years of suffering that I may have contributed to, I realized that I needed to pray every day. And prayer really helped me, because there were some days that I would think negative and there was no way at all that I could possibly think positive. So the way that I would manipulate the situation is by saying, this is the devil trying to make me think negative so that I can feel bad and stray away from God. And now instead I'm going to pray. And because I believe God is going to help me, it goes away. Rather than, I'm broken, it's part of my condition, and there's nothing I can do about it. But for those that are just tuning in, this is The Cure. I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. We're here speaking with Kirk Miller. And just to let you know, we are opening up the lines if you'd like to speak to us. The number is 305-541-2350. Again, that's 305-541-2350. We are focusing on mental illness, breaking the taboo, overcoming the effects, and how to heal. And when we come back, I'd like to talk about to Kirk about what he means about beyond clarity, which sounds extremely interesting to me. This is 880 AM The Biz, The Cure, with your host, Aimee Cabo. This is Dumb Blonde by Nicki Minaj and Avril Lavigne.
Telling me where I belong. You put me on the bench, don't think that I can play strong. So quick to condescend, well you think I'm empty, I'm not. You won't be so confident when I'm crushing you from the top. I'm a babe, I'm a boss, and I'm making this money. I can flip like a switch and I cut like a blade. Try to get it out, I can sting like a bee, but I'm sweeter than honey. And I'm quick as a whip, so get out of my way. Come and get it out. I ain't no dumb blonde, I ain't no stupid Barbie doll. I got my game on. Watch me, watch me, watch me prove you wrong. I ain't no dumb blonde, I am a freaking cherry dog. I'll be your icon. Watch me, watch me, watch me prove you wrong. Stand up, everybody. Turn up, say it loud. We're bombshells raising hell now. Watch me, watch me prove you wrong. Stand up, everybody. Turn up, say it loud. We're bombshells raising hell now. Watch me prove you wrong. Well, there you go again. You're talking down to me. I may look innocent, don't underestimate me. I'm gold, I'm platinum, don't you know I'm out of your league? Step back, your time is up. Sit down, I'm taking the lead. I'm a babe, I'm a boss, and I'm making this money. I can flip like a switch and I cut like a blade. Try to get it out, I can sting like a bee, but I'm sweeter than honey. And I'm quick as a whip, so get out of my way. Come and get it out. I ain't no dumb blonde, I ain't no stupid Barbie doll. I got my game on. Watch me, watch me, watch me prove you wrong. I ain't no dumb blonde, I am a freaking cherry dog. I'll be your icon. Watch me, watch me, watch me prove you wrong. Stand up, everybody. Turn up, say it loud. We're bombshells raising hell now. Watch me prove you wrong. Stand up, everybody. Turn up, say it loud. We're bombshells raising hell now. Watch me prove you wrong.
Life can bring many difficult situations: domestic violence, addictions, poverty, and even sexual abuse by your loved ones. The issue is not stay there, but to overcome all obstacles and show that with the love of God, your husband, and your family, you can succeed. Love is the answer, God is the cure, reveals from a very sincere and honest position Aimee Cabo's life, a warrior who didn't give up and achieved the dream of her life. You can get to know more about her and her story on www.godisthecure.com or buying her book on Amazon.com. And now we continue with Aimee Cabo and The Cure on 880 The Biz.
Welcome back to the show. For those that are tuning in, this is The Cure, and I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. If this is your first time tuning in, we typically focus on topics related to mental health, abuse, trauma, and treatment options. Today, we're joined by Kirk Miller, and we're talking about how to overcome mental illness and have positive behaviors. And Kirk, I was very interested that you're a host for a radio show called Beyond Clarity, and I was curious about that. Could you tell us a little bit about what you mean, Beyond Clarity?
Yeah. Well, actually, we started about a year and a little over a year and a half ago, and it was with two mental health professionals and then myself. And we thought it would be a very fascinating show to offer people perspectives from both sides, both people who are working with patients and then also someone who has been through a lot of therapy and has gone through a lot of different trials. So the listener can get both perspectives. And the show has done really well. And right now, honestly, it's all three of us have kind of gotten some unique offers. And so what we're trying to do is figure out our next step forward. in how we're going to continue to do that. But if anyone would like to listen, it's on beyondclarity.net, and all of our old shows are on there. And we talk about everything from the tough issues like suicide prevention, alcohol abuse, substance abuse, just in general. We'll be doing a show to finalize that. But all mental health issues, and it's been a wonderful experience for me just to be able to talk openly about what I dealt with. There's a very heavy stigma on having mental health issues, especially bipolar, and there's a few of them that when I meet people, I usually get one of two reactions. If they're familiar with bipolar and they've had a family member that's really suffered with bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and they had a bad experience, they literally typically kind of stay away from me and are scared. And I completely understand why, because I was very hard on the people that were around me. The ups and downs and being very aggressive and even violent when I was manic was very challenging for the people that were around me. So, that's one reaction. The other reaction that I usually get is if they haven't heard anything about it, a lot of times they think bipolar is just, happy and sad. And I think you get the same stigma and misunderstandings and misconceptions with things like just clinical depression. There are certain things that we deal with that are, unless you've gone through it, other people don't completely understand, and that's not their fault. It's and I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that and experience it. What I really wanted to do for me was reach out and show that it's okay to talk. It's safe to talk about the things you're struggling with, and being open and communicating.
You see, to be able to do that, you have to be in the right place. You have to be willing to help yourself. I remember a time that music sounded like loud noise to me. And maybe doing kind acts, I didn't want to do anything. So, how did I get there? For some reason, I do entertain myself with Facebook. And I ran into the rosary when I was doing my Facebook. And in the rosary, it says many important things, like set your heart on things that are in heaven, not the things that are on earth. And I swear, once I started praying every day, something happened. Like I got smarter. And I don't know, I started opening up my eyes. I started seeing blessings I didn't see before. Now the music had messages that applied to me that were helpful. I saw how God was helping me through people, through music, through my pets, through Facebook posts. I noticed the blessing that He blesses us every day. We just don't take notice. And life isn't easy. You take one day at a time. It doesn't mean life will be perfect or things will get better. Challenges will still come. That's part of life. It's learning lessons. I can tell you I'm going through a challenge right now. It's not that I'm exempt from suffering because I've suffered so much already and now I deserve not to suffer anymore. No, it doesn't work that way. As long as you're alive, it continues to be interesting. But
I really liked what you said about there's always blessings and good things that are there and present in our lives. And a lot of times we struggle to find those and see them. And for me, the more I was able to focus on the positive aspects in my life, the good things in my life, or the good things that I was doing, and the more my life turned towards that direction, the easier it was for me to see them. And the dark sides and the thoughts that I dealt with started kind of fading away. I I talk about in my book that I never really, they always ask me what my favorite color is. That's a really common question for kids. And I didn't really see color the same way I do now. So, and music, the same thing. There were especially moments when I was manic and I felt elated, and so I would be very attached to a song, or another day I might listen to the same song, and if I was depressed, I'd turn it off. So there was a struggle at finding that kind of balance. And, you know, there's no reason why I can't share this. They did a very fascinating study, and it was on using an anti-estrogen to treat manic episodes. And that's where I started my journey of research, was there. And it was a long, arduous trial with my doctor and I, you know, being very cautious with medication and, you know, of course, talking to, because I worked with a general practitioner and a psychiatrist. But
you know,
you brought up,
psychiatrists didn't really work for me, or that traditional thing. And medication, I would grow the resistance, and I was basically like a guinea pig. You know, for me, it really had to start with prayer. That was my strength. I mean, there was other things also that I could incorporate. For example, I learned from an existential psychologist that it's important to make a schedule of things to do throughout the day that would make you feel accomplished. Even better if you do things that make you feel better about yourself. Music can be helpful, and music can inspire you. These things can help. And if you do pray, eventually you learn to seek God. You learn to praise Him. For example, I never read the Bible, and now, because I see things in Facebook, I'm curious. And now, believe it or not, I'm starting to read it, because this is what I found in Facebook. Every day God thinks of you. Psalm 68:16. It's actually written in the Bible. That's nice. Now I can refer to that, and I don't have to be boring stuff. Every hour God looks after you. 2 Thessalonians 3:3. It's in the Bible. Every minute God cares for you. Peter 5:7. Oh, wait, 1 Peter 5:7. Because every second He loves you. Jeremiah.
It's such a wonderful
31:3.
message. Oh my goodness. Well, and I think from what I deal with in the social media realm, I really feel like positive messages like that are the things that are the good part of social media. And there's so many negative things out there. So when you bring up words like that and things that bring comfort to people, everyone is not going to work the same way, and we're not going to heal the same way. But I do believe that kindness, love, compassion, empathy, those are things that we have an endless amount of, and we can give as much of that as we want. And I found, for me, much like what you're saying, when I reframed my issues around being a compassionate individual and a loving individual, my life changed. And so a lot of the things you just said, I really, first of all, appreciate and want to thank you for bringing up. And number two, I find it very inspirational to talk to somebody who is looking at all of the positives and literally trying to find those. And that's something that really just made my day. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to thank you right there for what you're doing and for helping people reframe their life around things and stay away from some of all the negative stuff that's out there. And, look at all of these beautiful things. Like you said, my sister actually, one thing she always did when she was young, and she still does it to this day, she has her Bible, and whenever she struggled with something, she would just literally pick a random page. And she said for some reason, whatever page she opened up to, she said there was something in there, some wisdom that helped her.
It's got to be some secret weapon. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and it was one thing that she said. So when you said that, it just reminded me of my sister, and I choked up a little bit. I just wanted to tell you that was your message is very, I think, spot on, and I think what we're learning about the brain and stuff like that, I think a lot of times we separate our mind from some of the other spiritual aspects, such as faith. And no matter what faith someone has, we all need faith. And it's something that I feel if I wouldn't have had not just faith in, a purpose, but faith in myself, I don't think I would still be here. And, so for me, what you're talking about really hits a nerve. So please, do you have any more examples of some of those posts?
I do come up with Facebook posts. Actually, if you go to the podcasts and you look for Aimee with an I, not a Y, and Cabo, as in Cabo St. Lucas, you'll see the Cure podcast, and it has radio shows that I've actually aired, some testimonials that were extremely interesting, really interesting sayings and Bible references for those who want to, listen to the Bible. And it's been very interesting because, believe it or not, sometimes I don't have anything for the show except for the day when I pray my rosary. Before you know it, these things come up. I get all these ideas. I don't know. Somehow God helps me. And I really do credit it all to God. But for those who are tuning in, this is The Cure. I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. And don't forget, we have the lines open. If you have any questions or you want to share your story, it's 305-541-2350. We're live every Friday at 2 p.m. This is 880 The Biz. This is The Cure. I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. And this is I Can Only Imagine by Mercy Me.
I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I would do is forever worship you. I can only imagine, yeah. I can only imagine to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Can bring many difficult situations: domestic violence, addictions, poverty, and even sexual abuse by your loved ones. The issue is not stay there, but to overcome all obstacles and show that with the love of God, your husband, and your family, you can succeed. Love is the answer, God is the cure, reveals from a very sincere and honest position Aimee Cabo's life, a warrior who didn't give up and achieved the dream of her life. You can get to know more about her and her story on www.godisthecure.com or buying her book on Amazon.com. And now we continue with Aimee Cabo and The Cure on 880 The Biz.
You're back. Thanks for joining us. This is The Cure, and I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. You can listen to The Cure every Friday at 2 p.m. live. It's on 880 AM The Biz. And we deal with anybody suffering and different ways that we can help you. We're joined by Dr. Boris Nikolov and Kirk Miller, an amazing person, because we're all in it together. Thank God that there's people that are willing to help and people that are willing to listen. And I want everyone to know you're not alone. We're here for you.
Yeah, hi, Kirk. Thank you for being on the show.
It's an honor.
I was just really impressed of what you're doing because, see, healthcare professionals are not enough to help with patients with mental illness, and it's definitely super important to get rid of the misconception that, or the label that when you have a mental illness, you are less of a person and you can't do stuff. And you're an example that actually you can be a totally different well-functioning person, and you're helping others. So have you been having success with a lot of people that I understand that you work with people that you help them and guide them through your website, chaos2cure.com?
Chaos to Cure. Yeah.
Okay.
I have, I've had a lot of, I really have had a lot of success with.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Some wonderful people, and I think the hardest hurdle that I've really had to deal with are some of the issues that I'm sure you understand, which is, the medication usage,
right,
and doctors working with it, especially with an off-label medication. And I was actually asked to write my book. It was not something I had ever planned on doing. I had written fiction books before. I have about 8 or 9 manuscripts. I actually had one offer at one point, and it was when I was really extremely bipolar, and I was really suffering, and I thought they were trying to steal my book. And so I lost out on the opportunity to actually publish one.
Okay.
And what happened is I worked with my doctor, and we started doing some case studies, and at a certain point, my success was so different than anything they had seen.
Nice.
They started to look at some other options, and eventually the person who wrote the foreword to my book is actually Dean Stahl. He's a PhD, and he invented Taxol, which is one of the most widely used chemotherapy drugs. And he wrote the foreword to my book, which was a huge honor. It took me about 2 or 3 years just to connect with him because, of course, it sounded really out of the ordinary to get a phone call from somebody and say, listen, I think I found something that's a really viable option for those that are recalcitrant. So those that are not able to use at least the standard medication.
Not responding.
So recalcitrant. Yeah, exactly. They're not responding to current medications. And so that message, of course, sounded really strange coming from somebody that has bipolar because it sounds way out of the ordinary. So, he carefully watched the process for about, I'd say, 3 years. And slowly our meetings would switch from, a short email to then eventually I think it was maybe like a year later, we met for coffee, and now we're very close friends. And he said, you have to tell your story. He said the best way to get this moving forward and getting pharmaceutical companies interested in doing full clinical trials, he said, is to publish the information. He said, let's see what they do. He said, it's going to be difficult because they're generic and there's not a lot of profit for the companies unless they make a combination or something else, maybe combine it with a different drug.
And just for a reminder, your book is called Chaos to Cured.
Correct. Chaos to Cured. And by Kirk Miller. If you can't find it, sometimes if you're searching for the book, it is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So, certainly feel free. And if anybody ever has questions or would like to reach out to me as well, I love Twitter because it's a great place for me to stay positive and send out kind messages and try to help people. So my thing is at chaos and then number 2 cured, at chaos to cured.
Because, Kirk, you seem to be like a world of information. It's amazing. I didn't even know about these things.
But by the way,
you.
That's very interesting. I don't know if you know, Kirk, but we actually have a clinical research center. So we definitely need to start talking a little bit later with you about a possible study.
Integrating
maybe we can do that.
Kind of therapy.
Would definitely love to talk to you, yes.
That would be super interesting.
Absolutely.
Because we're always trying to find different ways to help people. I mean, just a psychiatrist or a therapist isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
Or just medication. It's a combination of things. And yes, the support system helps, but some people don't have a support system. So sometimes you have to depend on yourself. And the only one that you can have, if you have no one, is God. And believe it or not, when you get closer to God, you tend to do kind acts. You tend to seek God more, and you tend to feel better about yourself. Your mind, the way you think, changes. And what's beautiful about life is interacting with one another. And every opportunity we get to do something kind, it's great, because who knows, once we die, whether we'll even have our human form, or we'll even have emotions, or need one another. Maybe this is our last hurrah. We have to live on the here and now. Today only comes once. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings, and nobody knows the day you die. Not too long ago, my daughter, her classmate, one day the father killed the mother, and my daughter's classmate in the 4th grade, and her little brother. And it's very sad. But you don't know when you're going to die. So I tell everybody, I tell my husband, my friends, my children, live every life as if it was your last day. Live it as if is this your last day. Don't waste your time thinking negative. I know I did for many years. But I learned that it's all about what you want to believe. The mind is a very powerful thing. The other day, I saw somebody interview someone and said, oh, this person is from the Bronx. And then the person the person says, I like this politician because she's from the Bronx. And then the interviewer goes, oh, she's not from the Bronx. She's from somewhere else. And he goes, well, she's from the Bronx for me, because that's what he wants to believe. And that's what makes him happy. And that's just it. You need to believe, most importantly, that God loves you.
You know what, Aimee, I loved, there were two things that you said that I think are worth, bringing up again. One, there's not always somebody that has a support system. And when you don't have that support system, a lot of times people feel very alone. And even when I had a support system and I was not mentally well, I didn't see it as a support system.
No, right.
And the people that were the most supportive to me were some of the people I lashed out to in the harshest and meanest way.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Kirk. There is always, also I wanted to mention that, and so for our listeners to know, there is support groups. Absolutely. So there is people, of course, that don't have support groups around, support people, family around them, but they can always look for a support group through their local church or hospital.
But when you're in a bad place,
Absolutely.
You're not even going to look for help.
Right,
you're
right.
not going to recognize the support system. You're not going to let music be therapeutic. For me, I had to pray and I had to seek God and get close to Him and change my behavior to start to learn to love myself again so that I can forgive myself so that I would feel worthwhile. That's what did it for me. I'm curious, what did it for Kirk? What did it for you, Kirk?
Well, one thing that I remember very vividly is I was reading a book, and I remember the book really well because I have like 4 copies now, and it's called Awakening the Buddha Within. And I don't know why the book struck me, but there was one point when I was reading it, and it talks about being kind, focusing on, like every time you walk through a doorway, treat it with reverence, the fact that you're able to even be there and the world around you. It had a special meaning, but what was so strange is I literally made a list of all the people that I had hurt in the past, and I started making phone calls to each one. And I went all the way back to kindergarten. There's still about 4 or 5 that I haven't been able to find and get a hold of.
Wow, you have a good memory.
Called them up. Well, unfortunately,
We're very
I had enough
organized.
people. It was a long list. But every time I called and asked for forgiveness and apologized for hurting them, even though it wasn't my fault, because of mental health, it was still something that affected them. And that act kind of changed my path. And it kind of set me in motion to be a little bit more positive. And that's what made me start looking for other answers. I just knew there had to be something more than, okay, listen, these are the only things that ever work for bipolar, so that's what we're going to do. And I wanted to see if there was some other complex or really simplistic answers. Maybe these were system-based. What reasons do people have bipolar? What other things mimic bipolar that are out there in literature, and the two fields haven't connected? And I found endocrinology and psychiatry had not talked with each other. Nice. There are all these papers that support one or the other, especially with, anabolic steroid abuse. When people come off of it, a lot of their behavior is described just the same way you describe somebody with bipolar. So I started trying to go to different fields and see where the papers connected, where the authors themselves or other medical professionals had not discussed or talked. And so for me, it was, the real thing was realizing that I had hurt people, and then having the desire to make things right and do good things. That set me off on the right path. And then things kind of cascaded from there. And, now I have a wonderful wife and 2 nieces that I probably would not have been able to interact with had I been in my previous state. And I'm very, very happy that I'm able to actually enjoy my life and function at a level that allows me to work and allows me a life that I can enjoy. And you mentioned before, there's always stumbles in life. There's always difficulties that come up and sometimes surprise you. And for me, as long as I have the ability to try to focus on what I went through and where I'm at now, when I compare those, one thing that I do is whenever I'm in a happy state or just a consistent, and I know I'm in a good place, I will write down certain things to remind myself.
What made you happy?
And then when I have a down or I have like a really hard day and it's hard for me to find something positive, I'll open it up and I can see what I wrote down, and all of a sudden it's easier to remember. And one thing I definitely would say, if somebody feels really alone and they're on Facebook or they're on Twitter, I really like hashtags, because you can do hashtags and you can type in kindness or hashtag and compassion and or hashtag, like you can pick something positive, and then all of these beautiful messages come up. There's some in there that are advertisements or somebody's using the hashtag for a different motive, but it's a very effective way to search. And then you find out that you're not necessarily alone. And a lot of them also have support groups that they mention. And, when you're in that really down state where you really have a hard time even reaching out, sometimes just being able to click on something that leads you to a safe place where you can maybe find some help or somebody that's going through the same struggles is something that I highly suggest.
Yeah, I mean we're all struggling. Yes, life is it's a ride. What can I tell you? But we've come to the end of the show, and it's been wonderful having you, Kirk. It's been really wonderful. I feel so blessed to have such special people come onto the show, and the fact that I've seen so many people care, and that just shows that there is hope. So for you, the book education is what did it for you. And for me, just having God. When I have God, I can fight the devil anytime. So, but this is The Cure. I'm your host, Aimee Cabo. You've been listening to 880 AM The Biz. Remember, you can download it and join us next Friday. We are live every Friday. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is You'll Never Be the Same.
Just like nicotine, heroin, morphine. Suddenly I'm a fiend, and you're all I need, all I need. Yeah, yeah, all I need is you, babe. And I'm a sucker for the way that you move, babe. And I could try to run, but it would be useless. You're the babe. Just when hitting you, I know I'll never be the same. It's you, babe. And I'm a sucker for the way that you move, babe. And I could try to run, but it would be useless. You're the babe. Just when hitting you, I know I'll never, ever, ever be the same.
The Cure with Aimee Cabo was brought to you by IMIC Research, 786-310-7477 or www.godisthecure.com. Tune in every Friday at 2 p.m. for The Cure with Aimee Cabo, right here on 880 The Biz.